The Denver Broncos have struggled to establish a long-term franchise option at quarterback after John Elway called it quits in 1998. From 1999 to 2015, the Broncos employed quarterbacks such as Jake Plummer for 4 years, Brian Griese for 4 years, Jay Cutler for 2.5 years, Tim Tebow for 1.5 years, and Peyton Manning for 4 years. Of the four, Manning was by far the most successful, having one of the greatest quarterback seasons in history in 2013, as well as helping the Broncos win their first Super Bowl since Elway retired in 2015. After Super Bowl 50, Manning himself announced his retirement, and given the fact that he was coming off of a career worst year, it was probably for the better. Since Manning's retirement, they've continued to struggle to find their franchise quarterback. There have been many in the last 8 years, and in today's video, we're going to go through each one. Now, I have one specific criteria for this list. Each quarterback had to have started a minimum of 4 games during their tenure with the Broncos. If you guys are new to the channel and you'd like to see more videos like this, please be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and make sure to leave a comment with your feedback on what else you might want to see me post. With that said, let's get right into it. Out of every quarterback I'm going to name, Brock Osweiler probably had the most success with the Broncos. He was drafted at the end of the second round by Denver in 2012 and didn't get to see the field as a starter until the 2015 season when Peyton Manning was benched following a performance where he threw 4 interceptions and had a passer rating of 0. Osweiler would start 7 games for Denver, and while he didn't do anything that noteworthy, he was enough to put a spark in Denver for that final stretch of the season. Eventually, Manning returned in the season finale to help Denver clinch the AFC West, as well as a first-round bye for the playoffs. Manning would start throughout the playoffs, with the Broncos inevitably winning the Super Bowl that year against the white-hot Panthers, led by that season's league MVP Cam Newton. With Osweiler serving as the active backup, he would receive a ring for his efforts. He would also receive a 4-year, $72 million contract with the Houston Texans to be their starting quarterback. He didn't do that great, and was benched towards the end of the season for Tom Savage, who would later get injured, and Osweiler would be named the starter going into the playoffs, and they would go on to defeat the Oakland Raiders, who were missing Derek Carr due to a leg injury. They would lose their next game to the Patriots. They would be traded to the Browns in 2017, although he would later be waived and re-signed with Denver that season, where he wouldn't be the best possible version of himself like he was the first time around, but thankfully that wasn't fully on him as that Broncos team was in the very beginning of a very grim future. Osweiler would play one more season with Miami before retiring the following season.
How do you sleep at night, Miss Siemian?
Trevor Siemian was never expected to be a franchise guy for Denver, nor should he have been in retrospect. Even he didn't think he would get as far as he did in the NFL, as he had a real estate job already lined up for him in Chicago because he did not expect to get drafted. However, he was indeed drafted towards the end of the 7th round and was a third-string quarterback on that Super Bowl winning Broncos team I mentioned previously. After Peyton Manning's retirement and Brock Osweiler going to the Texans, Siemian competed with former Jets quarterback Mark Sanchez and rookie quarterback Paxton Lynch, who you'll talk about later on, for the starting job of the 2016 season. He would beat out Sanchez and Lynch and would go on to have a respectable-ish season, so much so that he would be brought back the next season where he had a very up-and-down year, in a season where he would be benched and suffer injuries throughout, which solidified for the Broncos that he would not be their guy. Siemian has made a great career for himself as a backup in recent years, and would even get the opportunity to start a few games for the Saints in 2021, holding his own after Jameis Winston tore his ACL before being benched yet again. Siemian has played for a total of 7 NFL teams, and there will likely always be a need for him from any team until he decides to hang it up. You hear the name Paxton Lynch nowadays, and you probably get a nice chuckle. But a lot of people once upon a time thought this man was going to be a demon. He's a 6'7" quarterback drafted late in the first round by Denver in 2016, and he was the 3rd quarterback taken in this draft behind Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. The NFL portion of this segment for Lynch will be relatively short because it only lasted for 4 starts, where in those 4 starts he wasn't really setting the world on fire and only started games due to Trevor Siemian getting injured. Siemian would be benched in favor of Lynch, but Lynch would get injured himself and Siemian got the starting job right back, and Lynch would never see the field again in the NFL. He would get relegated to 3rd string the next season and then cut eventually, and he would sign deals to join the practice squads of the Seahawks and Steelers, and even made it to the Steelers' active roster for a very brief period before getting cut again. This wouldn't be the end of his football career though, as he would sign with the Canadian Football League team and be their 4th string quarterback just to get cut later on. He would also get drafted in the 12th round of the USFL draft and get cut there. He signed with an XFL team just to get cut there as well. And he's currently signed with the San Antonio Brahmas in the XFL, so his career isn't technically dead, but he got cut in 4 different professional football leagues. In 3 of those, former NFL players typically thrive in. If you take a quarterback in the first round, you most certainly have long-term plans for them, which is what makes it so baffling that Lynch only started in 4 NFL games and 12 pro games in general. This has made him somehow one of the least talked about busts of the last 10 to 15 years or so, and yet another failed QB project for Denver post Peyton Manning. The story of Case Keenum is one of the more unique stories in NFL history. Keenum was undrafted and signed with the Texans in 2012, where he started his playing career with a record of 0-8. This isn't going to be used against him, as wins are not a QB stat, and that Texans team was not good, but it's so crazy to see that as I'm writing this. He played for the Rams in both St. Louis and Los Angeles before signing a deal to back up Sam Bradford on the Minnesota Vikings. Unfortunately, Bradford had wear and tear on his knee following 2 ACL surgeries, so he would miss the remainder of the season following his first game. This led to Case Keenum taking the starting job for the remainder of the season, where Minnesota would go 11-3 with Keenum putting up Pro Bowl caliber stats. Keenum even helped the Vikings reach the NFC Championship that season, and while they didn't end up making the Super Bowl, Keenum would make a lot of money the following season, signing a 2-year, $36 million deal with the Broncos. Keenum would play every game the following season for Denver, where he did not look at all like Minnesota Case Keenum. But it was another Denver team that couldn't get around 500. He would later get traded to Washington for a 6th-rounder and has since played for the Browns, the Bills, and the Texans yet again, this time as a 3rd-string quarterback behind CJ Stroud and Davis Mills. There was never any hope for Keenum to be a franchise quarterback for any organization, let alone the Broncos. This was just another placeholder for the purgatory that they were in the midst of suffering. Joe Flacco spent the first decade of his career starting for the Baltimore Ravens and even helped them win a Super Bowl in the 2012 season. Flacco's tenure as the Ravens starter would end in 2018, where he would suffer an injury which would lead Baltimore to start this dude named Lamar Jackson. You might have heard a thing or two about him, I don't know. Flacco, following the 2018 season, would be traded to the Broncos for a 4th-round pick and yet another effort to put a band-aid on a bullet wound. As I've said for a lot of other people on this list, he was never meant to be a long-term option, but this would be the last time a team went into a season with the intention of Joe Flacco being their starter. Flacco would suffer a season-ending neck injury in Week 8, and this would turn to Brandon Allen and later Drew Lock starting games for him. After this, Flacco would transition into a backup role officially for the Jets and Eagles, and even started this past Sunday with the Browns versus the Rams, and he actually looked alright considering Bro was just signed a few days prior. It's funny to think that the Browns are in a decent position to make the playoffs, by the way, and Joe Flacco could be their quarterback going into the playoffs in the year 2023. Well, 2024 by the time playoffs start, but good for him. The story of Drew Lock in certain aspects is similar to the story of Kyle Allen, which you can learn about by watching my video on Kyle Allen, link in the description as well as at the end of this video. They both started off their careers winning a good amount of games before falling off a cliff shortly after. The only difference is that Kyle Allen was undrafted while Locke was taken with the 52nd pick in the 2nd round of the 2019 draft. He played 5 games his rookie season and went 4-1, tying John Elway's franchise record for most wins by a quarterback in a rookie season. The next season was not nearly as kind to Locke, as he would go on to lead the league in interceptions and completion percentage would drop by almost 7%. He would be relegated to backup in year number 3 in favor of the newly acquired Teddy Bridgewater. More on him shortly. He would start 3 games in the 2021 season and didn't really do anything noteworthy enough to justify Denver hanging on to him. He would be involved in the massive haul given to the Seahawks for Russell Wilson and is currently backing up Geno Smith. Which, if you said this 3 years ago, you would think Pete Carroll lost his damn mind. I think he'll follow the Trevor Siemian career path in a backup role, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Not everyone's meant to be the guy, but this would be one of the biggest failed experiments from Denver over the past 10 years in an attempt to establish their future. The story of Teddy Bridgewater is a sad one to an extent because we'll never truly know how his career would have panned out without the injuries he suffered, whether it would be for better or worse. He laid low for a few years before having a career resurgence in 2019 with the Saints and Drew Brees' absence, helping New Orleans go 5-0 and having an incredibly efficient stretch, and this stretch led to him signing a 3-year deal with the Carolina Panthers worth $63 million. He would go on to get his career high in completion percentage and pass yards in Carolina before being traded to the Broncos for a 6th-rounder. The belief at this point, and for a year or two prior, was that Denver had everything else figured out on the team besides a quarterback, so them constantly not aiming for a long-term option made the whole process incredibly comical. Teddy didn't even do that bad at all, and even had the highest passer rating for a full season for his career. Denver was 7-7 with Bridgewater as the starter, and had a shot to make the playoffs until he suffered a concussion and Drew Lock took over the last 3 games going 0-3. Bridgewater, the last few years, has settled into a more permanent backup role, and is currently backing up Jared Goff in Detroit. Up to this point, this has arguably been Denver's best season with their revolving door quarterbacks.
Be careful though. It's spicy.
And finally, Mr.
Unlimited
himself, Russell Wilson. Wilson was Seattle's quarterback from 2012 to 2021, where in that time, he would win a Super Bowl in his second season and would consistently be a top 5 to 10 quarterback, establishing himself as the Seahawks' greatest quarterback in history. Wilson would get traded to the Broncos in 2022 along with a 4th-round pick to Seattle for Drew Lock, Noah Fant. What the fuck happened to Noah Fant, by the way? Denver's 2022 first-rounder, Denver's 2022 second-rounder, their 2022 5th-rounder, as well as their 2023 first and their 2023 second. As I mentioned when talking about Teddy Bridgewater, the belief was that Denver was one amazing quarterback away from making that leap into becoming serious contenders. A lot of people, myself included, thought that they would be up there with the Chiefs and the Ravens of the world, competing for the 1 seed in the AFC. We would be proven wrong very fast. In Wilson's first season with Denver, he would look like an absolute shell of himself, with him throwing more touchdowns than he has bathrooms in his home. The Broncos were one of the better defensive teams in 2022, but were statistically the worst offensive team in the NFL, averaging less than 17 points per game. The problem was believed to be Nathaniel Hackett, who was fired towards the end of the regular season, and they would go on to trade a future first and second to New Orleans for Sean Payton. And while the offense has improved significantly, Denver already improving their win total from last season, and Russell Wilson having a much better season up to this point than he had all of last season, it'll have to take winning a Super Bowl or even making an AFC Championship appearance for Denver to even have any form of argument when it comes to winning this trade, considering they haven't even sniffed the playoffs since 2015. I don't think that's Wilson's fault in the slightest, but he will inevitably be the scapegoat if this experiment is a failure. The sad truth of the matter is that this man, a first ballot Hall of Famer when it's all said and done, will be more known for the cringeball videos made with him as opposed to his play or his team's success on the field, which I think, coupled with every boneheaded decision Denver has made in the past decade, really should make you think about the direction this team has gone in and its fall from grace since 2015. But what do you think? Give me your feedback down in the comment section, as well as what else you would like to see me make in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next week. Peace out.